Namaste and welcome to today's class, or rather to today's session. Mm. And I have something I want to talk about today. And let's see, do I start off with talking about that, or should I start with a sitting practice? Uh, uh, what do I feel like? Sometimes it's good to check in and check like what does your body say. What does the energy say? What I think it's just I'm just sharing that as a manner of uh, self-awareness. Quite often most of us are very preoccupied with the mind and what the mind is telling us we need to do, and we may have a to-do list, but it's also good to every now and then check in, like, okay, what does the energy say? Like, um to give away I don't know, this may sound like a simple or a silly example. And just before I started this session, I was washing my clothes, and generally evening is not really the time to wash clothes because there is no sunlight. But I just felt like, I just want to wash my clothes, and I of course let it out to dry, and maybe I will have to dry them tomorrow as well. But the point I'm trying to make is sometimes you just need to check in. What is the energy saying? What does it really feel like doing? What do I want to do? And the topic for today is also linked to being connected with yourself, checking in what's happening inside. Mm. And quite often, I think I'll just start with the topic. Maybe we'll do a short sitting practice towards the end. Um, we get disconnected from our naturalness. And there are various reasons. Primary reason is, of course, our conditioning, which tells us that, you should be like this, you should feel like this, you should think like this. All of that is something which none of us can escape our childhood. And part of the childhood is conditioned according to what our parents tell us, according to what society tells us, according to what the educational institutions tell us. So most of us, I think almost all of us, are cannot escape the conditioning in some form or the other, in terms of what we should do, what we should feel, what we should think, how we should behave, all of that. It's a part of socialization. But mm, uh, essentially, what I want to talk about today is not really to do with just social conditioning. What I want to talk about today is about spiritual conditioning, and that's a topic which is quite close to my heart, because at one point of time I used to be an intense spiritual seeker. So I don't see myself, at least my energy is no longer of seeking anymore. So, but I used to be at one point of time. And I think a lot of people who come into uh, spirituality, or search for a deeper meaning in life, or searching for a higher self, or looking for liberation, enlightenment, godhood, self-realization, different words, nirvana, moksha, whatever. Mm. So most people who are pursuing a spiritual path are essentially called seekers. That's the general terminology. And when we become spiritual seekers, there's a different kind of a conditioning that often happens. And as a result of the spiritual conditioning, we often do not check in what's happening, or we often do not check in or acknowledge what we are feeling. We often are unable to see things as they are. That's what I'm trying to say. And there's a term for this, and which is what the topic for today's talk and session is about. The term for this is called spiritual bypass. Mhm. And I mean, this is actually a term. If you Google it up, you will find the meaning of the term. And essentially, in simple words, is spiritual bypass is avoiding what we are feeling uh, because it is deemed negative by us. Like maybe we may be feeling anger, maybe we may be feeling lust, maybe we may be feeling jealousy, maybe we may be feeling sadness, maybe we may be experiencing inner conflict, maybe we are experiencing hurt, various, but we do not allow ourselves to feel all of these emotions because according to our spiritual conditioning they are deemed as negative feelings. Because often part of the spiritual conditioning is that we must not be angry, we must be calm, we must have a balanced state of mind, we must be equanimous, we must be kind, we must be compassionate, we must be forgiving, we must be loving, we must be generous. So it's a huge list. And I think some of you may be definitely who are in this path of spiritual seeking and wanting to be a better version of yourself can relate to what I'm saying. And it's quite a tall order, actually, that we have to be this kind, loving, generous, enlightened human being who is always in the state of Zen likeness. And mm, and often we see our, our versions of enlightened masters all seem to have this beatific smile and like a halo behind their head. Whether you see Buddha's image, whether you see Christ, or whether you see um, Ram or Krishna or the sages, some of the sages that I have high regard is Ramna Maharishi. Mm. So all these and the one who is very popular, who's alive, Eckhart Tolle. All these people seem to be like in a very Zen-like, calm, meditative space. So quite often, the seeker believes that that is the ideal, that this is how I need to be. I need to be this calm, non-reactive, always balanced, always feeling positive emotions, always feeling loving, kind, happy, joyous, this. And this is a big problem. This is a form of another conditioning of the mind, which the mind cultivates an image of a what do you say, holier than thou image, that this is the kind of person I need to be. And then it tries to emulate this image that I have, or the mind has created of this saintly, loving, kind um, person. And what happens as a result of that, and I'm sharing this also from my personal experience, that there is a lot of suppression, avoidance of what we are actually feeling in the moment. And there was a time when, I used to be this so-called in the seeking mode. Um, And every time I would feel anger, or I would feel um, any kind of negative emotion, I would just lock myself in a room, keep a bottle of water next to me, have a spiritual book, and just sip on water, read whatever. And that was my way of wanting to calm myself, because I didn't want to show mm, my anger, or express, or leave alone express, or show my anger. I didn't even want to sort of acknowledge what I'm feeling. So as soon as there is anger and resentment, and I want to calm myself down, because I want to conform, or I want to fit into this image of a so-called spiritual person. And this aspect where we avoid experiencing, acknowledging, fully feeling whatever we are experiencing is called spiritual bypass. Another, because mm, uh, we are not deceptive to what is happening. We are not completely feeling what is happening. We are trying to feel, and quite often, not only are we not feeling what we are experiencing, we are trying to cultivate some positive emotion. Like you may be feeling angry, and then you may end up sort of justifying, or okay, now let me look at the positive side of it. Let me try to transform and change my emotion. I want to be more loving and kind. And I'm not saying that being loving and kind is is not good. Who doesn't want to be loving and kind? But trying to force yourself to feel that way is not really natural. It's not really authentic. What is authentic is to be with whatever emotion is being experienced in the moment, whatever emotion is getting triggered in the moment. If it is anger, experience it fully. If it is sadness, experience it fully. If it is jealousy, if it is lust, if it is whatever the emotion, experience it fully. And I'm not saying necessarily that one needs to act out the emotion. One can acknowledge and experience anger, the energy of anger fully, without necessarily having to be violent. One can There's a difference between experiencing an emotion fully and acting it out. And even expressing anger is not really so much of a bad thing. I mean, it's one of the flavors of being human, that there is sometimes you get irritated, you get frustrated, and then you want to express your anger because someone is really stepping on your boundaries. And in some ways, anger can also is a healthy way to maintain boundaries. That's to protect um, your yourself from all kinds of. So whether the anger, whether any emotion is justified or non-justified, that's another thing. We often, when we are so-called into spirituality, we often try to figure out, oh, am I justified to feel like this? Is it not justified to feel like this? um Maybe I should not be feeling like this. And we all get into this mental loop and constant thinking and analyzing, and to figure out whether we are justified to feel what we are feeling. And it's really not relevant, neither is it important whether you're justified to feel or not. The existential fact is, right now, in this moment, I am feeling something, I'm experiencing something. Let me just be with it and experience it fully. When we experience an emotion fully, there's a possibility that we can, it will move, it will resolve itself. The emotion will, because at the end of the day, all emotions, all feelings are transitory and passing. So all they really require is sort of our unconditional acceptance of what is. I think that's a good way to put it. Unconditional acceptance of what is. So whatever we are feeling, just sort of be with it and experience it fully. Um, I have seen quite often people sort of, um, one is they want to avoid feeling negativity, so they will try to justify, and try to convert the negative feeling into some kind of a positive feeling in their own mind, using their mind. In a way, it's almost like manipulating your mind to feel something, forcing yourself to feel the loving and kind. And especially people who are associated with spiritual organizations, I have seen that very often. And I've been, in my own past, I have been part of spiritual organizations. And everywhere, there is this whole setup of uh, a guru, with a who's very revered. And then there are everyone who's around the in that organization, and everyone is trying to be this compassionate, loving, kind, free of ego and all of that. And uh, sometimes, because you just want to fit into that system, you just don't even want to acknowledge the negative so-called, because really speaking, there is really no, I don't see it as any kind of a negative feeling or a positive feeling. A feeling is a feeling. So sometimes we just don't want to be with what we are feeling. We want to almost change that feeling into feeling loving, kind, inspired, because we want to fit into that system where everyone is geared towards being loving, kind, and inspired. So sometimes being part of a spiritual organization can be really very taxing. Because you're supposed to have this beautiful smile, and everyone is, it's, I mean, less said the better. I think one video I should make on my experience of being part of spiritual organizations. I think that's a whole topic in itself. So that's one thing, that we try to not only not feel the emotion, the so-called negative emotion, we try to convert the emotion to fit into our notion of how a spiritual person should be, or how people around us in that spiritual organization are being. Uh, the second is, we what also happens is that we sometimes are in situations which are not conducive, which are not really healthy, which are not really respectful, which are not really good for our emotional well-being, but we don't want to look into that. We just want to avoid looking into that aspect of it. And we continue being in these relationships, whether it's a relationship with an individual, whether it's a relationship with organization, because we just don't want to look at the shadow side of a relationship or an organization. Because we want to belong, we want to be part of the whole thing, so we just don't want to look at the shadow side of it, and neither do we want to confront it. So a lot of us well-meaning people, well-intentioned people, continue in relationships, whether it's with a relationship, an individual relationship or an organizational relationship, even beyond a point where it is, um, it's not good for our maybe self-respect, maybe it is not good for our emotional well-being, where we are feeling cheated, we are feeling betrayed, we are feeling exploited, we are feeling there is unfairness. We will shove all these feelings under the carpet because we want to be in this state of, mm, be good, do good. I think that's one of the syndromes that most spiritually inclined people uh, suffer from. Be good and do good. So in the name of always being good and doing good, we don't want to confront the shadow. Mm. It could be our own shadow, It could be our own inability to stand up for our own self. That's also a shadow. It could be our own fear of standing up. That's also a shadow. It could be the shadow of another individual where the other person is being cunning, manipulative, disrespectful. So that's that person's shadow. So we are not willing to look into our own shadow. We are not willing to look into the shadow of a relationship. We are not willing to look into the shadow of another person also. And quite often then we continue in that form of relating, and sometimes it's for years and years, and then it depletes us, and then sometimes there is a eruption, and then everything sort of explodes because we have been suppressing our emotions and feelings for a very long period of time. Sometimes a person just can get into a long period of depression because of that. So there are various things, but we don't want to sort of see things just the way they are. And I think sometimes the simplest and the easiest thing, which of course can also become very, very difficult, is to maybe put aside our spirituality and our spiritual notions of how we should be, and all that loving kindness and all of that. And sometimes it's really tiring to see people who are smiling all the time and trying to be very positive. And I mean, I've come across, and it doesn't feel like really authentic. It feels like constantly they're trying to be this loving kindness. It's almost like loving kindness, generosity on steroids. It's like, I mean, there are times when you are, of course, loving, kind, inspired, but there are times also, because that's also being part of human, that you feel anxious sometimes, you feel sad sometimes, you feel irritated sometimes, you feel low sometimes. And that's also a part of the human tapestry of the emotional landscape of being a human. But no, because I am spiritual, I have to be this loving, kind, inspired, this all the time. I sometimes I really wish, and I think there are, I mean, some of the teachers that I've been seeing on YouTube, particularly who talk about non-duality, are really regular human beings. And I think it's really refreshing to sometimes just come across regular human, authentic human beings who have owned up to their humanity fully. And I think we need some such role models of regular human beings, uh, maybe realized beings, but who have acknowledged the fact that, yes, I feel anxious sometimes, that I feel sad sometimes, I feel angry sometimes. Because whatever we see is either we see these enlightened beings with a halo behind their head and everywhere just smiling, and then we project all of that and believing that, no, I must not feel all of this. And sometimes that becomes really, that spirituality becomes very toxic. And why I say that it becomes toxic is because it makes you feel guilty. If you're feeling angry, you feel guilty. If you're feeling lustful, you feel guilty. If you're feeling greed, you're feeling guilty. And it's like you are feeling what you're feeling, and that the possibility for you to process what you're feeling, um, and bring it into awareness is much higher when you're not feeling guilty about some feeling. You're not feeling ashamed about feeling something. You're not regretting feeling something, because most spiritual mm, paths or most spiritual literature tends to say, no, be loving, be kind, cultivate this habit, be compassionate, be all. And I think it's fine. Yes, it's good to be loving, kind, and have cultivate certain virtues. But I think also virtues which just emerge out of a natural awareness and natural sensitivity are more authentic, rather than the virtues that we try to enforce by trying to fit into a certain image of how we should be. So uh, yes, so when we are constantly in this mode of having to be loving kind, then it's not really, we are again trying to push down certain emotions. We don't want to look into certain emotions because we feel that's the ego, that is the dark side of my personality. That's, I need to be this loving, kind, spiritual, evolved human being. So I think sometimes it's good, like I was saying, to just leave aside this so-called spiritual aspiration that we have of having to be a spiritual person, and simply be rational and logical, and just acknowledge, okay, this is, I'm feeling angry right now. I'm feeling sad right now. I'm feeling lonely right now. I'm feeling hurt right now. I'm feeling betrayed right now. I'm feeling, it's okay, whatever one may be feeling. And sometimes I think rather than, um, this is another thing that quite often happens, that we tend to feel that, I am this is all for my growth. If you're going through difficult feelings or emotions, we tend to feel, oh, this is, I'm going to learn something out of it. I mean, why do you want to add, superimpose some meaning into whatever? Yes, you may learn something out of it. There may be some awareness that may emerge out of it, but I think it's just good to just experience what is being felt as is, rather than trying to constantly superimpose some idea, some meaning into it. That, oh, this is for my growth. Oh, this is for me to learn something. Oh, this is because of karma. Oh, this is because of, something or the other. We constantly are into this meaning making thing. So simply see things as they are, without having to even add any meaning to it. And if we are in a relationship, and quite often our emotions are triggered when we are in a relationship, I think the simplest thing is to have a rational conversation with another person if it's possible. It's not always possible to have rational conversations. I think communication is highly overrated in terms of resolving relationship conflicts, because mm, it's not, everyone may not really be receptive to a mature conversation. Some people are, and that's great. So sometimes it's just good to sort of express what you're feeling. You can express what your needs are. uh, you can and then you can also receive from the other person, what does he feel, what does she feel, and what are their needs, and try to come to some kind of a common ground. And I'm talking about relationship, rather than simmering and being with discomfort, and then trying to sort of rationalize and say, oh, this is for my growth, this is for my learning, let me see what positive thing will come out of it. Oh, this is my issue. I think it is so we are complicating things and making it so, like tying up ourselves into emotional knots. I think the simplest thing is acknowledge what you're feeling. You can also check in, what are my beliefs, unconscious beliefs, which are triggering this feeling. Sometimes I think one should sort of look at so-called negative emotions with eyes of curiosity. You must just like see, like, oh, I'm feeling anger. Okay, let me see where in my body and what is this kind of feeling or emotion that is coming up. And just sort of being curious and just being with it. And then also checking, maybe what is the belief that I'm carrying that is triggering this anger? What is it? Or what is my unmet need that is getting triggered? So sometimes it's just like a curious thing. And but sometimes also emotions can be very, very intense, and sometimes they can also have a physical symptom to it. Maybe some people sweat, some people find it being breathless, some people mm, even puke when they are feeling very intense emotions. Some people get cramps in their stomach. So some emotions come with great intensity also. And I think the best thing that to do in that is to let go and just be in a state of surrender, to allow the emotion, the physical symptoms to play it itself out and to go through you. And sometimes you may need to have somebody next to you when you're feeling some intense emotions, and that could be helpful. But the more we try to sort of resist it, the more it gets distorted, and sometimes it gets more intense because of our own resistance towards the emotion or the feeling or the physical sensation. So, and also, I think two more important things is that it is good to not only acknowledge what we are feeling, but we should also acknowledge what we need. Mm. This is another thing about being spiritual, is that we have this there's a term that which I've come across. It's called spiritual workaholism. So we are constantly trying to be this spiritual workaholic, constantly heal ourselves, constantly trying to do some workshop, do some course, cultivate virtues, cultivate all of the things that we are trying to be in this name of spirituality. And often when we are trying to be this unconditionally loving, free of so-called desires, which is what how spirituality is perceived, totally accepting of whatever life situations we are in. That's these are the notions of spirituality. We tend to overlook our simple, basic emotional needs as human beings. As human beings, the body has a need. The body has a need to be fed well. The body has a need to be physically maintained well. The body has a need to rest well. The body has a need to sleep well. The body has a need for hygiene. So we have a body, no matter whatever we may believe ourselves as being spirit and soul and Atman or whatever. But the fact is there is a body, and the body has its needs to maintain. Similarly, it is good to also acknowledge that we have certain emotional needs. And our emotional needs are, yes, I want to be loved. Yes, I want to be respected. Yes, I want to be understood. I want to connect authentically. I want to be inspired. I want to do work which really enhances or where I can express my creativity. I want to be in a community where I feel I belong. These are simple, natural, emotional needs. Sometimes in the need to be spiritual, we just want to say that, no, I have no need and I have no desire. And I think this, I wish I had gotten this wisdom long back, because this has been such a struggle for me in my uh, so-called journey, because I didn't want to acknowledge my so-called negative feelings, and neither did I want to acknowledge my emotional needs. And largely because of all the idealism that surrounds spirituality, being kind, being loving, being desireless, being, uh, you know. So I think spirituality doesn't mean discounting or invalidating our humanity. Humanity means a body, humanity means a mind. The body has needs, the mind, the emotions also have certain needs. Mm. So, in fact, uh, I think, one element, I wouldn't say even one element. I think spirituality, if at all you ask me, has made me feel more human than anything else. Rather than I would say, oh, it has made me more spiritual, more evolved, more. I think I have learned to accept what is rather than trying to fight what is, rather than trying to be like a certain image of the kind of person I need to be. Just being with what is, and also acknowledging, like, yeah, I have needs. Yeah, I have preferences. Yes, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with being subjective, and what's wrong with being human? Yes, I have a preference to live comfortably. I have a preference to have Indian food over Japanese food. Somebody was inviting me for Japanese food yesterday. I said, I'm just simple dal roti chawal kind of person. That's my preference. I have a preference to. I feel comfortable wearing kurta pajamas, so that's my preference. What's wrong with having preferences? Because you are human, you have a certain degree of um, uh, conditioning, cultural conditioning, you have certain degree of your natural preferences, and that's perfectly fine. And fine if my preferences are not met, then I accept it. But if I have a choice and I have to choose between chocolate ice cream, vanilla ice cream, butterscotch, then I have a preference. I will say I have chocolate ice cream. Being spiritual doesn't mean whatever is available. That's uncertain. Yeah, if you don't mind anything, then that's fine. But just saying, oh, I am, no, whatever happens doesn't make any difference to me because I am a spiritual and trying to be in this mode of spirituality. Really, I've come across so many people who try to act and be spiritual, and I've been one of them in my erstwhile avatar as a seeker and trying to be this spiritual person. And it's not authentic, it doesn't sustain for very long. So, so I think that's really the essence of uh, today's session, which is to having an aspiration. I don't know whether aspiration is right, but being spiritual doesn't mean that you let go of your humanity, of what you're feeling, of your emotional needs. Um, on the contrary, I would say uh, it is. I have to give a simple definition of spirituality. According to me, it is acceptance of what is. Simple. I'm not even adding the word unconditional acceptance of what is, because then that's another heavy word. Just simply acceptance of what is. Just being with what is. Nothing more. Because whatever is an expression of life. Whatever is an expression of existence. So if existence is expressing anger right now, then fine, just be with it. If existence is creating too many conflicting thoughts, then just be with it. Rather than trying to force ourselves to feel something and trying to rid ourselves, this is the spiritual ego, if I may say. I want to rid myself of these feelings and I want to feel this feeling because this is a better feeling to feel. Or I should not acknowledge that I have certain needs and desires and I just want to be need free and desire free. So be aware. I think the essence of this session is be aware of this so-called spiritual ego that tends to get created, and the spiritual ego tends to not acknowledge certain feelings, does not give space for us to feel those feelings, and sometimes the spiritual ego does not acknowledge certain basic human needs. We don't want to because we want to be this spiritual, holier than thou person. Someone is being disrespectful, rather than confront the person. No, we want to be calm and balanced. So I think free ourselves from this conditioning of spirituality, because really we come to spirituality because we want to free ourselves from the conditioning of our social upbringing, our social, general mainstream social upbringing. The conditioning is success, money, mm, career growth. That's a typical whatever. And then we get, some of us get tired of that typical social conditioning, and then we look for answers, or having the perfect relationship, all those fantasies that we have of social conditioning. And we burn our fingers, or we get tired of doing all the things that we imagine that society believes will give us happiness. And then we come to spirituality to look for answers which are more deeper, which are more meaningful, which will fulfill us uh, authentically, and all of that. And then when we come to spirituality, then there's another kind of a spiritual conditioning that takes place. And then again, we sort of we create this spiritual ego and this spiritual ambitiousness. In fact, there's a term by this Tibetan Buddhist meditation master, Chorgrian Trumpa. I don't know whether I pronounced his word, pronounce his name correctly. He coined the word spiritual materialism. So we get into this whole spiritual materialism of trying to be a spiritual person. Spirituality is not trying to be someone. It's to realize that really there is really no someone. Everything is an expression of existence and life, and whatever life is expressing, and is, there's no right and wrong. This is what it is, just being with what it is. And yet at the same time doesn't mean you sort of have to necessarily express what it is. You can still use your discrimination, because discrimination is also part of what is. So if you're feeling intense anger, fine, you're feeling that intense anger, but that does not necessarily mean that you can't use your discrimination and see, okay, what do I need to do with that anger? Because that's also part of what is the discrimination and the wisdom. Mm. So, yeah, so learning to just be with what is. And sometimes when we are feeling something intense, it is also good to take some time out to just be with what is. Like, just sit by yourself, maybe just have a cup of tea, maybe lie down, maybe just, I think when something intense is triggered, it is good to just take some time out to be with what is. Because it's, when you're occupied with something, you're feeling something intense, you're thinking something, but you're doing something, you're not able to neither do that completely fully, you're not able to completely be with what's happening. So it's just good to take some time out to be with what is, and then also continue doing. Sometimes you can also be with what is and continue doing whatever else you're doing. Maybe one need not do something really taxing, but still you can always be with the feeling or emotion. Don't try to get rid of it, don't try to indulge it necessarily, just be with it, and then continue doing whatever you're doing. I think it's just important to fully feel whatever we are experiencing, rather than ridding ourselves of something and trying to cultivate forcefully something. Just be with what is. So let's practice some being with what is, which is have a short sitting practice. And then we will end today's session. So take a deep breath in and exhale. Sit comfortably wherever you are. And close your eyes. Put your hands and palms wherever you feel comfortable. And just be with whatever is happening right now. The breath, the sensations, the movement of the body, and thoughts, if any. Imagine there is no you. Imagine there is just this infinite empty space in which everything is occurring. Whatever is experienced right now is occurring in this infinite empty space. Neither is it done by you, neither is it experienced by you. Whatever is happening is just happening. There's no resistance to what's happening. There's no pursuit or desire for something to happen. Because empty space has no choice. It simply allows whatever is happening to happen, simply witnessing what happens. More we are able to just simply be, you notice that there's less friction, less stress. And even if there is friction, stress, resistance, accept that too. If the mind is resisting something, then accept the mind that is resisting something. This emptiness has really no goal and agenda. It simply is with what is. The nature of this emptiness seems to be silent, aware, still, without boundaries, without judgments, without any preferences. The mind may have preferences, but awareness simply notices without any judgments of those preferences. Total acceptance of what is, total presence of what is, total awareness of what is. The more we can cultivate this attitude of just simply being with what is without the feeling of right or wrong, good or bad, should or should not, the more we feel comfortable, the more we feel at ease, the more we are in touch with what's happening. And sometimes it helps to just close our eyes, sit still, and check in to see what's happening, to be with what is. Take a deep breath in and exhale. Another deep breath in and exhale. Slowly and gently at your own time and pace. Whenever you feel like it, you can gently rub your palms and cup your eyes. Okay, so I hope you found this video relevant, this topic relevant. Um, I think this topic is really relevant for people who are spiritual seekers. Um, and if you relate to it, or if you know someone else who may find this beneficial, then feel free to share the video. And if you have any feedback, feel free to share your feedback about your own experiences of spiritual bypassing. Another word I've heard people use is spiritual bandage. When we are not really looking into something and just covering it up. but the general term that is used for not acknowledging what we are feeling or not acknowledging our needs is called spiritual bypassing. Okay, so with that, we end today's session, and I'll see you all next session. Goodbye. God bless. Take care.